Hey everybody, and welcome to the 12:30 panel presentation, Regenerative Cultivation, Techniques and Opportunities. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't already done so. I am Shango, host of the Shaping Fire podcast. If you like listening to smart interviews with the top minds in cannabis, I invite you to check out the show at shapingfire.com. We also have an extraordinary YouTube channel with over 150 speaker videos I've recorded at events just like this one. In fact, Colin, one of our speakers, already appears on the channel several times, teaching about various aspects of microbes and microbiology. So first off, we're going to introduce our panelists, starting from the far end. Colin is co-founder of Growsentia and co-inventor of their flagship product, Mammoth P from Mammoth Microbes. Colin completed his PhD in soil microbial ecology in 2009. As a research scientist at Colorado State University, Colin published dozens of peer-reviewed publications that were focused on microbial-mediated processes that enhance plant growth. Colin left his academic position at Colorado State University in March 2015 to launch Growsentia. To his side is Jacob Policzer. He is the co-founder and director of science and strategy of the Cannabis Conservancy, a sustainable cannabis standards development and certification body. Jacob is also the co-founder and board chair of Sun and Earth Certified, a regenerative cannabis and hemp certification nonprofit. He is a member of Denver's Department of Public Health and Environment's Cannabis Sustainability Work Group and the National Cannabis Industry Association's Cannabis Cultivation Committee. And to his right is John Paul Maxfield. He is the founder and CEO of Waste Farmers, a company developing people, businesses, and brands who transform emerging social and environmental needs into market-based opportunities. John Paul also leads Batch 64, a cannabis cultivation solutions partner that provides a unified platform for premium, responsibly sourced growing media and plant nutrition, allowing the world's leading cannabis producers to scale efficiently and consciously. Also, JP is one of Denver Business Journal's top 40 under 40. So please welcome our panelists. So the speakers asked me, they want to make sure that they design their answers most appropriate for the room. So I'm going to give you 4 categories, and if you see yourself in this category, raise your hand if you would. So if you're a cultivator, raise your hand, please. All right, and then if you are a dispensary owner or employee, all right, and then if you are a manufacturer, all right, and then other. All right, there we go. So there's a general idea, guys. So let's see. So first of all, let's get right into it. For this question, we're going to start with Colin on the far end, and then Jacob and John Paul can jump in. So Colin, regenerative cannabis agriculture is increasing in popularity and importance, and the range of ways to practice it in commercial cultivation is pretty huge. So what is an example of a regenerative practice that is easy to get into, that has real benefits within a year?
Can you hear me? Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to keep it with my expertise on the science side. Regenerate to replace. Regenerative cells is biology. We replace our cells, we regrow our cells. Or in farming, it's about making sure, and I think about this in terms of sustainability also, we're giving more than we take away. That's what I think about when I think about regenerative practices. And as soon as I think about regenerative agriculture, I think about carbon. And carbon is the currency of all life on Earth, and it's definitely the currency of soil health. And the problem that we have in agriculture, in general agriculture, is that we're taking carbon out of the system as we break it up, as we till it, as we farm it. We're losing soil organic matter, soil organic carbon, and that holds everything for soil fertility, nutrient holding capacity, water holding capacity. And so to answer that question, what I think about when I think about regenerative agriculture as one simple thing that you can do is think about the carbon. How are you adding more carbon into your soil, into your substrate, than you are taking away? And you can do that through a lot of different means. There's biochar as an example. And I just want to preface that it's about how you're getting it on the back end too. You know, thinking about where all your inputs are originating from is a part of regeneration. And so it's a big picture, but if you think about it in terms of how you can maintain your soil, you can add as little as possible. You really have to start with thinking about the carbon in that soil. And that's a pretty big topic, but that's where I'm going to leave it right now. Thanks.
That's great. Jacob, same thing to you. So what's an example of regenerative practice that's easy to get into and has benefits within a year?
Yeah, so I would say from a cultivation point of view, practices, simple ones, mulching. You're really trying to build and support the soil health. So that comes with not having bare soil. So mulching is a big one. Also like planting beneficial insectaries on your edges or in between rows, companion planting, cover cropping, crop rotation, reducing tillage. There's a whole lot of things. It depends on if you're starting where you are, but simple things, and kind of also just it's helpful to take a step back and see where you want to be and then how to do that with the resources you have on hand. But I guess the goal is to really try to improve your on-site soil fertility. So try to tackle one thing, plant some comfrey, plant some chamomile, different things like that. That'll like slowly help to either improve your soil quality and nutrient content, or also reduce your IPM needs, and try to bring nature into your grow.
And to you, John Paul.
This question scares the hell out of me, and I'll tell you why. Just because it talks about, and I'm going to sound like a permaculturalist, and permaculturalists tend to sound like assholes sometimes, and I don't mean to, but like, we're talking about, thinking about wholes, and we're talking about thinking about systems. And what we're talking about now is sort of best practices, which is a base layer of regenerative thinking. And so I think the best return in a year is to start with essence. Essence is something that is the idea that no two snowflakes look alike. Start with essence of self, essence of the property that or the place that you're growing, and really get to understand that at a deep level. I think that is the place to start. And the things that we're discussing now in terms of these best practices are sort of the functional layers of kind of the one foundational layer of regenerative as a practice applied to agriculture.
Right on. So for this question, we're going to start with you, Jacob, and then John Paul, and then Colin will jump in at the end. So since some of the biggest advantages of regenerative agriculture take some time to evolve, right? Where the first question was just about the first year, most of the cool stuff about regeneratives, is 5 and 10 years out. Since some of the biggest advantages of regenerative agriculture take some time to evolve, let's talk about the things we can do for the future, but take action now. So Jacob, what is a regenerative strategy or series of techniques that take some effort now, but will result in an outsized advantage down the line?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this and wanted to kind of come up with like a cultivation strategy, but I'm gonna use this opportunity now. So I guess from the cultivation side, breeding, genetics, having something that's specific to your site that's going to thrive in your specific microclimate and deal with the pests that you have and be able to uptake the nutrients and survive, the temperature swings and different things like that. But not everyone is ready to start doing that. So forming, seed sharing networks. But I want to kind of talk about supporting farmers and supporting your workers and, creating a healthy, positive, fulfilling work environment, which comes in from like your recruiting, giving people opportunities, across the spectrum, to, bring in some more farmers and promote it. But I think if you're looking at like what's going to pay dividends long term is building that network. And teaching people how to grow, learning, sharing knowledge. We're in a situation now, especially if you're a small farmer, you're a homesteader, there's big corporations coming in. We need to band together and support each other. It's the only way we're all gonna survive. And I think building those networks and taking that opportunity, and that comes into how do we compensate workers. There's financial compensation, but I think there's also a lot of other benefits. I would like to see, if you're a regenerative farmer, you should be growing more than just cannabis. You shouldn't be monocropping. You should be supporting CSAs, or at least providing food to your workers. But I think it's providing, that kind of fostering of an environment of, respect, dignity, mutual appreciation. You're helping a farmer's helping you, or a worker, etc. And then the community in general. And I think that's what's really going to see dividends in the future. It's rather than siloing us and thinking like, oh, I have a secret sauce. This is my IP. This is my edge. We're all trying to do the same thing. And when it comes to regenerative, it's a big path, forward, and everyone adds a little bit, and we're all learning from each other. So I think it's kind of building that context rather than a specific agricultural thing that we can do.
Right on, great. So John Paul, this is more of a permaculture timeline question, right? So what's something that can be done now that the benefits we'll see are significant about 5 or 10 years out?
Yeah, so how many of you are growing outdoors of all the cultivators? So I think, specifically for you, I think on that baseline is soil health, first and foremost. And I think soil health has, applications to reduced inputs and lower input cost, but also building soil carbon and if we're able to develop a market for carbon, the potential for monetizing ecosystem services, monetizing carbon credits. And so I think from that base level, soil health is number one. And investments, whether it's soil carbon or microbes, and I think, the world of microbes, we're just, you understand it, more than most in the world, but I think we're just beginning to understand the true potential, and but at a very base level for outdoor growers, it's soil health, soil health, soil health.
Colin.
Yeah, I really like what everyone's sharing here, and from the essence of the first conversation all the way down to the practices. And what I'm hearing is honestly, it depends on who you are. It depends on where you're growing. I think ultimately, farmers that grow organically in any kind of crop understand you're not growing plants, you're growing soil, and soil's growing plants. And so you gotta focus on it. And it takes a long time to turn soil from a degraded soil to a soil that actually can sustain life on its own with minimal inputs. And so that timeline is critical. And we're talking decades in some cases, in extreme cases, and so that's a big deal. I would say on a broader level, do you have a plan and do you have a goal? And if you don't have the vision, that destination, that's where you have to start. And it's gonna be different depending on the essence of your property and where you are geographically. Do you have to capture the water? Some places you do, some places that's not a major priority. The soil's always going to be important. The amount of inputs is always going to be important. Your culture on your farm and the people that you surround yourself with, that's sustainable living as far as I'm concerned. It's choices. Who do we want to be around? Who do we want to live this life with? And so all these details are critical. And there's a plan. There's a destination, there's a goal. You have got to understand what that is for you, and then you have strategies. You have ways to get there, and then you have these series of tactics that are steps along your journey to make it happen. Regenerative agriculture isn't a, hey, I'm gonna do that this year. It's like, this is how I'm gonna live my life, and you'll always progress year after year, probably for your whole life, to continue to improve those types of practices. So it's a lifestyle, and the more you can turn your crop to a sustainable level of regenerative agriculture, you're going to see benefits not only economically from how you're living, but the quality of crops that you're growing can improve substantially through more organic lifestyles. And I think we all know that if we've tried or seen some of the end products from that type of growing.
That's a great transition, Colin. We're going to pass it down to JP here. So because, a lot of us have got regenerative agriculture in our heart, right? We want to do the right thing. We want to help the planet. We don't want the runoff from our property to be causing damage on our neighbors' properties. But at the same time, margins are tight in cannabis. And sometimes regenerative agriculture is considered to be, time-consuming and laborious, and you got to buy inputs. And sometimes it's just easier to buy a bottled something on the shelf and go with that, right? But it's surprising how financially smart doing regenerative agriculture can be. So with you, we'll start with you on this one, John Paul, and then Jacob, and then Colin. So to many folks, regenerative practices appear expensive in the short term in time, labor, and sometimes inputs. But those of us who are further down the regenerative path know that regenerative actually saves money and increases yields both now and over time. So JP, please describe a way that you've seen regenerative practices directly impact the bottom line and create increased revenue.
Sure. So, I think I can apply it, I think, to our own company. We're a regenerative company and do work with Carol Sanford, who's a really great thinker on regenerative as applied to business. And I think you can translate that to agriculture as well. So if you haven't seen her work, I would highly recommend looking into it. But the idea, again, starting with essence, understanding our essence as a company, which fortunately or unfortunately tends to stem from the founder, depending on who it is. And then really, why that's important is because in a marketplace, no one, if essence is unique and innate, no one can copy it. And if you understand that, then it makes you, non-displaceable in the market. Then it's a consideration for what we call our stakeholders in traditional business, or say in agriculture. It's tended to be pretty myopic. We have a multi-stakeholder approach where we talk about our customers, our co-creators, which is the folks that work with us, and then supply chain, community, the earth, and then also investors. And how do we add value? And you talked about things in balance. I think that another term in terms of regeneration is reciprocity in the system. And so it really is about the critical reason I pointed to question number one in terms of what are these best practices that we can get to a return in a year, is because there's no best practice that you can just adopt that what might work for another might not work for you, might not work for the property that you're on. And there's an old saying of you could take the engine of a Mercedes and BMW, I don't know what car, Ford, BMW, and if you took the best pieces of those and then put those together in another engine, it wouldn't work, right? Because it's about it's about the whole, it's about the system. And for us, understanding not only our essence, but then the essence of our customers, which is unique, right? And so we work with multi-state operators who want to grow and want standardized operating procedures, but as you guys know, every grow is different. Every room within a grow can be different, right? If we're talking indoor. And so to apply best practices to that just doesn't work. And so seeing customers from the essence of what they want to achieve has opened up a great deal of ability for us to help make their lives better. And so from a farming perspective, again, starting with yourself in terms of the essence of what you want to achieve, what the land is able to achieve, and getting to know your end customers and their lives and what they want to achieve, I think really helps to improve the value and that exchange of value, that reciprocity across the system.
Right on, Jacob.
All right, so I'm going to say, kind of when you said SOPs, kind of triggered something. Yeah. So say for my answer to this question on where to find returns on this, getting certified, which kind of comes into documentation, record keeping, writing down what you're doing for a whole suite of reasons. But one is, you should be planning before the season, figuring out what's going on in that season, what worked, what didn't work, so that you can refer back to it and build your own farmer's almanac. But then also, to have that genuine interaction with the consumer. Consumers are hungry for buying, cannabis, hemp that is, aligned with their values. They now have access to information. They're entitled to information. Smart consumers, I mean, we all want that. And they're starting to ask for, certified products. There is still a lot of greenwashing in cannabis. And so through Sun and Earth Certified and the Cannabis Conservancy, we're like, Simply Certified, I think, but we work with distributors, brands, buyers for regenerative farms, sustainable farms, to try to guarantee them, premiums on their product. And then, what I would like to see is all of the certifications working together to have a organic, certified shelf in the dispensary. And I think that's a big thing is, putting our money where our mouth is, but like opening up our grows and with the consumer. I was thinking about this the other day. We're a lot like the winery industry on some level, and there's a million wines out there. And like, I like wine, but like I can tell, the differences between all these different, Merlots or something. But it's like, if I go to a winery, then I kind of have that connection. So if I go to a farm, I'm more likely to have loyalty to that farm, to want that farm, to understand how it was grown. And I think, having that connection, which is kind of what certification does, but then also, just different partnerships that we can have with, bud tenders in the dispensary of, as best as possible, showing the consumer where and how and who is growing their cannabis. I think that's what really pays dividends and what differentiates, regenerative farms from every other farm out there. And so, yeah, I think that's.
So I think what I'd add to what's been shared is, we're talking about a what, and we're also talking about this how. I think we've identified that how is different depending on who you are, what your farm looks like, the needs that you have to get to this what. But for me, this is also about a why. At the end of the day, we are people, and we're all driven by a why. I know I am in particular. That's why we started an organic microbial company from the university, because we're bringing nature to agriculture, and that's what I've been thinking about for decades. And I realized that my fundamental scientific training could be applied to bring value to farmers and help me realize and live my why. And it's a good thing. You have to prosper. We should be able to live in abundance as business owners, as growers. But it also, and I'll tell you what I think, is the value is our why. We can reach this destination, but we live our whole life in a journey. And we'll hit our goals as people who are trying to get to a destination, no doubt about it. You can walk in a straight line and get places. And our whole lives are in that walk. And if this is how you want to live your life, if this is how you want to manage your farm, that's way more valuable than maybe getting, as an extreme example, a little more yield by pouring a bunch of salt and not giving a difference. This means things to people, and if it means stuff to you, it enriches your life. And at the end of the day, you're not going to think about that extra pound per crop that you developed by using the salt. You're going to think about how you lived your life the way you wanted to live your life, and you developed your farm, and you built your soil, and it meant something. And it's there after you're gone. And honestly, that's what we should be doing, focusing on a why. And for me, this topic is all about the why. And it means something, and it drives us all up on the stage, and I'm sure it drives a lot of you in that audience also. If it's not your why, it's not. It requires extra work, it requires a whole different level of management, and it's a different lifestyle. For many, many people, they wouldn't have it any other way. I deal with them all the time, and I love it. And so it's a choice. There's trade-offs. There's no perfection. But the value can go way beyond that extra whatever. If you're talking about money, you're talking to the wrong guy. You could care less about a dollar. I care about the way I live my life, and I care about a why that I have. And we're allowed to have one more why, but this is a big one. And it's a special thing to follow. And I think it's more gratifying and more rewarding than anything I'll ever look at in my bank account. And that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice the other. It's just a trade-offs that you want to look at as a business also. That's it. Thanks.
You're going to say precision in applications.
So I agree with that. So one of the things that you didn't mention, my grandfather was nominated as the Agricultural Citizen of the Century in Wyoming. And a lot of the things that he helped pioneer were some of the things we're trying to move beyond with regard to regenerative ag. And the reason that I'm sort of harping on this idea of like, you can't, take best practices and apply it without some understanding of like a baseline of essence, right? Because that's what industrial agriculture was. It was really like, how do we take this method of what we're doing and apply it across any landscape? We'll flatten it, we'll remove trees, we'll do all those things, and we're living with the repercussions of that, right? But for farmers, and one of the things you mentioned, the challenge with these things, right, with regenerative, organic, and these standards, and typically with consumer demands, is that we're putting the risk of these things on the most vulnerable, right, which is the farmer. And that's a challenge, but I think part of, in terms of the long-term horizon, from my perspective, we have undervalued assets. And those undervalued assets are land that we have sort of looked at really extractively, like what can we take out of it? But where we are with climate, right, and what we need to do to slow or maintain a climate that is habitable for people is remove carbon from the atmosphere. That's a $6 trillion opportunity, right? And so while hemp and cannabis might seem like a huge market, it pales in comparison to the market of what carbon will be. And so in terms of how that frames how you manage today for tomorrow, I firmly believe that the value of carbon in the next decade, hopefully sooner, will be realized. And the practices, and these regenerative practices, will be something that returns the balance back to farmers. And so I think that the only way to change a system is sort of within a system. And so the system we got is capitalism. The system we got is what we're dealing with today. But I think there's a huge opportunity, a $6 trillion opportunity to manage, or that's a poor word, but to bring systems back into balance. And I think the value of carbon in the soil is going to be an enormous, enormous opportunity. And I think farmers are positioned very well who start working towards that today to benefit from that. And in so doing, benefit the people they work with, benefit the communities where they grow, benefit the ecosystem, and so forth.
Hold on to the mic there.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to add to that is, so if you're in the room and you're thinking about going into regenerative agriculture, and like none of the three guys really said you're going to make more money. So let me be that person. What we're finding is with regenerative agriculture is when you use it, you're creating higher yielding plants, you spend less money fighting pests because the plants are stronger and they take care of the pest resistance themselves. You get a marketing advantage because people want to buy products that are aligned with their value. The value of your property increases because you're not dumping salt-based nutrients on it. And like Colin was saying when he brought out his philosopher scientist, you just feel better about life. So if you're talking with your business partners and you've got to convince them to go regenerative, there is lots of evidence out there that shows that you can actually make more money going with regenerative techniques than you can by using other techniques. All right, so with that, we're going to move on. So we're doing well on time, and so we're going to ask you guys one more question that I didn't let you know about in advance. And we will have time for questions, so after this question, I will come out to you. So kind of get your question in your head. We'll have a good 10 minutes for it. So guys, one of the things that's interesting about regenerative is how we have to balance the competitiveness, because we need to make sure that we're in the market and we can sell our products. But at the same time, we're not competitive because we're all trying to make regenerative cannabis agriculture a thing, right? We want there to be more of it, both for just, the quality of cannabis and human life, but also because we want it to replace traditional industrial agricultural practices, which could totally take over cannabis if we regenerative people don't do something about it, right? So here's my question that I'm gonna ask, and we'll start with JP and head down the line there. So in trying to balance the competitiveness, because we want to make sure our products are sold, but also we also need to work together in community as regenerative folk and family, right? Give one example that people can use to create some kind of partnership or community with their people who have other farmers who are essentially their competitors in the marketplace, but actually are all part of the regenerative family.
Sure. So I think I think you might have similar experiences, like both of you, but I think the cannabis industry is it's one where there is this notion of protecting information. And it doesn't exist in other, sectors of agriculture to the extent that it does in cannabis. And I think what you're missing is a knowledge share, right? And also just support, because the truth is it's hard. And the people that can understand best how hard it is are the people doing it. And so on an emotional level, it's beneficial, right? But then there are, lessons. There are bits of knowledge that can be shared, and we were talking about sort of putting together a group of cultivators to just get together, not try to sell shit, but just get together and just talk and share. And because I think a lot of growers feel pretty isolated, is what we understand, and that's a shame, because what that leads to is really great people deciding not to continue forward, right? And so I think there needs to be more, and I think there's a dearth of community beyond sort of surface level. And I know, from a CEO perspective, which is, pretty much what most cultivators are, is sort of the CEO. It's a very isolating, activity. You're sort of, solo. And I think that a community of people who can understand and go beyond just empathy, but sort of really understand, is beneficial. So there's not a lot of it. I think there needs to be more with it. And I think getting back to essence, I think the essence discussion removes this notion of competitiveness and what is really a neoliberal myth. I think is the basis of essence is you can't be me, right? And I can't be you. And depending on what you believe, right? We're we, right? Whatever. But that essence aspect is critical, because if you understand that and you stay true to it, then you have no fear of somebody, there's no competition in that respect. So that's why I think essence in this discussion of regeneration is a very, very critical point to understand.
Well, thanks, JP. So Jacob, you mentioned one earlier that I really liked, which is the regional seed swapping group, right? So that's a great idea. What's another one?
So I'm thinking is, because regenerative is we're building this movement, and what we're seeing a lot a little bit in Colorado, a lot in Northern California, we do a lot of our work out there, is being a regenerative farmer, abiding by these practices, working towards it, has formed partnerships with other similar like-minded, self-subscribing individuals who are in the distribution, manufacturing ranks, where we are having farmers now that are pre-selling their product before they're ever harvesting it, which takes a huge relief off of them, because they know that it's going to have either the bag appeal, the terpene profile. These terpene profiles are going to be huge. I hope so, coming up, so stop losing these, kind of arbitrary strain names that we've been giving it and really go into what the terpene profile is so we can know the effects they're going to have on us, but that's another thing. But having that, but then having the quality that they know that, especially manufacturers, so they're coming down into farms and they're, harvesting all of the outdoor, bucking it right down there, and then taking it away and paying for all of that, and the farmers just get this, set amount right there per pound, and it's a huge relief, so they don't have to worry about the drying, the curing, all of that space on site. But we're also seeing valleys and different watersheds where the cultivation climates are very similar are coming together and sharing barn space. Big thing is sharing harvesting opportunities. Not everyone's going to harvest at the exact same time, so instead of having to hire an employees, you can share there, and really kind of like the whole barn raising mentality of back in the day can easily translates into cannabis. But then I think a big part of that is also just having those connections within the farmer community to kind of know what's on the boundary. Mother Nature throws stuff at us every single day. It's really helpful to hear someone, 20 miles south, like, hey, thrips are coming through. Oh, we got these russet mites, and this is what I've done over the last 20 years that works, and so we're not trying things on our own and taking a salesman's word for it, but we've had farmers who actually do it, and it's succeeding. Like one of the new things I've been seeing is farmers companion planting with chamomile, and are swearing that they're getting boosted THC percentages, and that their buds are even better for making hash and concentrates. That's like a huge thing. Chamomile, so growing chamomile interspersed in the beds, but there's some particular strategies with it. But I heard it from 10 farms this year, that they're like, yeah, it's working amazing. Of one of those things where I feel pretty confident telling you guys, I think you should check it out. I haven't heard any bad things from it. It might affect your watering strategies a little bit if you're really, really dialed in on your drip. You might want to think about that, but things like that, rather than just hearing it or reading about it, on social media or something, but having those farmers that are growing in the same microclimate that you are, and what's working and what isn't. But yeah, so really with that.
Yeah, I really love what everyone shared, and I think about the same things. I think about collaborative. I think about mind share. Co-op is one of the things that's a big word in NorCal, or sun-grown cooperatives, where people are actually banding together to take distribution and own some more of the distribution space in the Northern California market, where it's very hard for craft farmers to outcompete everybody. It's just not realistic. You have so much more control of your channel if you're working together, at least at this stage of their companies, and I think about it from a microbial perspective, and I have this product, and everyone asks, what about your competitors? And I go, what competitors? The other companies that are making microbes that I love, and this movement, and this value, and this why they're doing the same thing. They're not my competitors. They're my allies. I'll sell their products right along with mine, and I will encourage people to use those products along with mine. And everyone's like, that's a little different. It's the power of a why. Regenerative farmers, sun-grown farmers, all these concepts work well together. And if you collaborate, community, mind share, it works. It doesn't have to be a fear-based competition. And honestly, you talk about the high tide rises all ships. It's just true. And it starts with that collaboration and community, in my opinion.
That's fantastic, Colin. All right, so we got about 10 minutes for questions. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. I want to let the three of you know that each of you are invited to respond, but don't feel like you have to jump on a question that you don't really have anything on, and we'll just move along. But if all three of you want to get on a question, don't hesitate.
Thanks, Shango. Thanks, guys. Not all of us farmers have fields and soil that we can work with. Some of us really want to bring on that regenerative mindset to the way we do things, maybe in a greenhouse in containers or in an indoor space in containers. Can you speak on some regenerative practices for folks who are in those situations? Because I think as we all start gaining our right to grow, a lot of us are going to want to grow in our backyards or in our house, in our tents. And so what are some regenerative practices that we can do to be in line with that kind of philosophy and way of thinking?
I'd say from an indoor grow environment, regenerative is a living soil if you can, and start to go in there. And even if you're growing in pots, use that soil, find a space, compost it, get soil tests. Soil tests are huge, so therefore you're not guessing, but you can really dial in precisely how much nutrients that soil needs and where to, how to apply it, when to apply it, and that's gonna change a bit. And I think Colin can speak on behalf of that with when it comes to NPK stuff and what we need in the soil biology. But I think also from an indoor grow is because we do a lot of sustainability for indoor grows, is looking at your energy, water, and waste streams, and how can you do it. So simple as how are you sourcing your products? If you can buy super sacks and use them, buy that rather than plastic palletized bags of soil, and reduce your waste there. Actually measure what your waste is every week, and what are you looking at? What's compostable, what's plastics, recyclables, and then what's just going to be solid municipal waste that's going to go to the landfill, and how can you do it, and what is it? I mean, there's always going to be gloves. You can't really get away from that, but kind of really fine tune it. And then your lighting systems. Really look at your PPFD. And can you afford to get new lights? Look at the lighting efficiency of that, so micromoles per joule. You really want, I would say 1.9 or above, so LED is even double-ended, and it's just how much of the energy it's using is going to be turned into usable light. And then look at your distribution of your lights and try to have as big a spacing as possible of those lights, so you can reduce your lights there. Time of day use and staggering of rooms. I mean, all of those combined can save you 20 to 30% of your lighting, which for an indoor grow could be 40, 50% of your total overall cost. So there are a lot of things there, but it's using data to help inform your decisions, and really tracking what that is.
All right, great. We're over here now.
Okay, I'm an outdoor farmer as well as an indoor farmer. On the indoor, we got pollinated on the outdoor, so we won't talk about that. But on the indoor,
What did you say?
on the indoor, we had problems with mites, spotted mites, 2 spotted mites, and we went from 500 plants down. We're now down to 50. We of course removed the plants, the dirt's somewhere else. So my question is, what I'm getting from you is I can make money creating my own microbes, my own dirt. But what can I do with the dirt that had the mites in it? Is there a way to remediate that?
Yeah, so we're talking about soil, not plants. There are products and natural products out there that you can probably mitigate a lot of that. I think there's composting techniques depending on the volume of that, where you can get rid of the eggs and probably burn out through the heat of the composting a lot of those insects. It's a process, though. To be clear, there's time, there's resources, there's space, and to actually do that, but you can do it. And so I would say also on the front end, you could improve or at least try to identify your sources of potential contamination or infection, and work on those processes so you don't invite those pests in, whether they come in on your clones or they come in on your soil. Identify that, because once you got them, and pests and pest pressures everywhere. That's nature. There's no such thing as no pressure. There's just levels of it. And so it's a probability game, and you're playing the probability game there. So yeah, you can treat everything. Once you have something, you might always have a level of it. You want to keep it low enough that you can manage. And so thinking about your front end processes, people have not only spores covering them, but they potentially, as soon as you brush up against a bush, you're going to have a bug on your shoulder. And so we have to just look at that at how we're managing. But
Yeah. So I think one thing is farmers are notorious for not valuing their time. And so what I would say is, this is it's easy for me, we have quality analytics that we deliver with every batch of soil, because we're testing, and we are testing those things so you know exactly what comes into your grow, because we know the impact that pests can have, and how important it is to have really good understanding of what's coming in on the front end. And so from my perspective, this is part of the reason why we exist. I think it's who you're working with and the co-creators or the suppliers that are supplying you goods. We ship directly to growers for that reason, because we can manage the supply chain and we know exactly, it came from our door and went to your door. We know, the analytics when it left our facility and arrived at your door. And so I think that's pretty critical. And that's why we exist.
I would just say a couple things to think about. I mean, your situation with the mites and all that would be solarization is one thing, covering in thick plastic, letting it really heat up. Predatory mites, and then potentially planting trap plants in there, depending on the mites. So plants that the mites are going to love that you can then remove and take them off site, are just some ideas. But I think it kind of ties into the whole regenerative thing, is that we're trying to create ecosystems and mimic nature within our growth. So mimic nature is going to work for us, and nature abhors a vacuum. So if you have a really well-balanced ecosystem, you're going to have mites, but they'll never get to population explosion, or where they're going to be a huge problem. They're really going to target your weak plants, which is kind of nature indicating, that plant doesn't need to be here anyways. And so instead of using a lot of pesticides, you just plant a little 10% more and then thin it out as needed, and just do that, and then breed of what you're really seeing on your property. Oh, these plants are killing it right now, or they're mite resistant, never had an issue. This is genetics we want to, keep going. So just some ideas.
Right on, we've got time for one last question.
How you doing? This question is to Mammoth. So I'm a first-time grower. Just did my first grow in September. So I've talked to you on the internet about seeing somebody that was using your name trying to sell me bud. Found out. I looked at the emblem, seen that the emblem was on his hat, seen that it said Mammoth, and it found you. So I said, all right, this company must be somebody that's worthy of a name, while somebody would be stealing it. I said, you must be famous. But my question is, now using your product, I used your product in my first grow. They said that your product kicked ass when I went to the hydro store. So now my question is, when using your product, is that something that I can use on a daily regimen of, when I'm watering? Can I put that in my water process, or do I use it once a week? What's the time frame that I should be using that product?
First of all, congratulations. Glad that you're getting into the growing, and thanks a lot. Yeah, I have a lot of imposters on Instagram, so sorry about that. And it's nature. It's nature in a bottle with precision functionality.
Right.
Yes, you have a lot of flexibility. I wanted you to think about the performance and the economics. You can use it continuous. A lot of growers see great results. It's a 0.6 mil per gallon.
Right.
Using it twice a week in your feed. If you have big feed tanks, you can just add it in there and feed it in through the week. There's so much room. Go ahead.
Quick question, sorry. Now with that, is that the 0.6 for hydroponics, or is that with soil also?
Yeah, that's a great question. So across the board.
Okay.
Early on, I used to have different regimes for soil versus hydroponics, true hydroponics, and what we realize is with regular applications, the data seems so similar with yield and quality that we just reduce it to that low 0.6 mil per gallon application rate. Brings more value to growers with about the same results.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
One more question. So now, with using it, I was talking to the hydroponics store. They said pretty much, I think, triple, or that's what I took from you, that I should triple the amount that I was using for soil. Using more, would that cause an issue?
Won't cause an issue. It's just a diminishing return. Okay. You're going to find that balance where you're not going to get that return by the actual additives, and so you want to have that point where you continue to see that increase with increased applications. Gotcha. And once you find that point, that's where you're going to get it. I'm happy to talk with you offline on that too. We have a booth over there. Happy to hook you up with the team as well.
Since you've got access to the real Colin and not one of his online imposters, right? Right on. So thank you all for being here, and let's thank our guests Colin Bell, Jacob Policzer, and John Paul Maxfield. Thank you very much. If you want to see this presentation again, or if you want to show it to friends or business partners, it'll be on the Shaping Fire YouTube page in about 2 weeks. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you guys.
Thank you very much.